How's it going, everybody? I'm Robert Kelly again. This is something I wanted to talk about for quite some time, and hopefully this will be shown and maybe shared by others on the YouTube community. And it's going to be somewhat of a controversial subject. I may have talked about this with others before, but here it is. This year marks 50 years of the burgeoning LGBTQ movement. Now, for the record, I am not LGBTQ. I'm actually a straight person. I'm attracted to women. Nonetheless, I do support and have family that are LGBTQ. I'm not going to say who. That's between the family and I. So, but anyway, this marks 50 years. In 1969, so many different things, so many different events had gone on at that time frame that made people understand that LGBTQ people, lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transgenders, queers, whatnot, were just really like you and I. And they wanted their rights. They wanted to be recognized. They didn't want to be criminalized for the sexual presentation that they had. And what started really with, I'll take your pick, either Judy Garland passing away, and Judy Garland herself was not LGBTQ, but she was well liked and well respected and acknowledged by the gay community. Or really 2 weeks after her death, which was the Stonebridge riots in New York City. What started at that point became an eventual burgeoning of people understanding that gay people are just like us, and they want their rights, they want their needs. For the most part, for a number of years, including much of my lifetime, it was kind of really confined into an understanding around the coastal areas in the States and in some other countries, the more liberal-minded places. New York, for instance, San Francisco, for another instance. But something else also occurred that same year in 1969, which I really believe helped the idea of LGBTQ people coming into acceptance. And it's from an unlikely source if you don't think about it. But if you do think about it, it's clear as day. And that source was a series that premiered on PBS, or NET at the time, and then PBS, that was conceived by Joan Gans Cooney, Lloyd Morissette of the Children's Television Workshop, and brought to life and developed by them and so many other people, including perhaps most notably Jim Henson and a number of his associates and collaborators. And that series, of course, was Sesame Street. If you really watch it, if you really take a look at it, you'll notice that there's two characters from the beginning, and still on to this day, although not as, 50 years on, things change. So they're not as essential, but they are essential in many respects. And the two characters, of course, were voiced initially by Jim Henson and Frank Oz, Ernie and Bert. Sesame Workshop has always said that Ernie and Bert are just two friends that live in the same apartment and they like each other very much. There's more to it. There's a lot more to it. You and I know this, if you really watch it. They're a gay couple. One of the writers that started writing for Sesame Street in the 80s have pretty much said, when I wrote for the sketches of them, I based them on my experience. This is what this writer is saying. I forgot the name of the writer. Now again, many of the individuals that were involved with Sesame Street at the time, and many of the puppeteers or what have you, were not and are not gay individuals. There are some exceptions. Richard Hunt, for instance, actually was a gay man. He actually was openly gay at a time in which it was a bit taboo to be openly gay. but he was openly gay at his point. He made no bones about it. And sadly, he passed away of AIDS in 1992. I know. You look at the last couple of years of his life, especially when he was mentioning about when he was at Jim Henson's memorial service at St. John the Divine. He was looking frail even then. It's sad. Anyway, for people that watch the show like me, and I would consider myself one of those that grew up watching it during the classic old school era, which for me is really the first 21 seasons up until Jim Henson's death in 1990. That really is for us Sesame Street. I mean, it's always going to be Sesame Street, but that's the Sesame Street that the Henson Company and the Disney, they don't own necessarily, but they have the tapes, they have the multimedia, what have you. Sesame Workshop always has the intellectual property, but whatever. For people that grew up at that time, you never had to have people saying on the show or in real life, well, what is the reason is that Bert and Bernie are living together? Why do they sleep in nearby beds? Because they're not brothers, they're not anything of that sort. Now, I think, from my opinion, they, as I said, they were a gay couple, in my opinion. But how it worked is they never made much of a mention about it. You just had to accept it. It's like, this is who we are. You know, this is Ernie. This is my old buddy Bert. You know, this is their quirks and everything like that. And you just had to accept it for what it was. And people were able to do that, particularly kids that watched it. Kids, young people, among others, and the parents that watched it, they grew to understanding that, you know, being gay was fine. And they never had to say they were gay. All they had to say was, we're just two people that like each other very much and we live together. And that made people understand when they were, especially people in the LGBTQ community, that when they began to understand their sexual orientation, when they began to understand their true identities, you know, you'd have people be confused, like, oh, this is gay. What does that mean? That's wrong. That's pedophilia or whatever. But then they could say to them, well, you know, if they really were paying attention, they could say, you know, Bert and Ernie are gay. And usually those conversations would have pretty much been the end of the matter. It would have been, yeah, they are. And they're just like us. There's nothing different with them. I think that show, Sesame Street, what particularly Jim Henson was able to do, and really the culture of the time, and really TV in and of itself, helped pave the way for people to gain acceptance and understanding about the gay community. I think so. It's not just myself that thinks that way. Bill Maher once said it on his series Real Time, that he felt that television was the main fulcrum to allowing LGBTQ rights to go to the forefront. He's not wrong. Now, I want to kind of take this into something that's kind of related, but it is something which I'm a little concerned about. And this might be a little controversial, but here it goes. This is kind of related. One of the people that was kind of a champion, or at least an associated champion of Sesame Street and of children's education, among other matters, around that time, and someone that actually did get a doctorate in child psychology, is a man you all know, you probably never really gave much of a thought about. If you're younger, you probably just don't like the guy. Of course, I'm talking about the one, the only, Dr. William H. Cosby Jr., EDD. Bill Cosby. I wanted to kind of string horn to the Cosby matter because if I'm going to link this to some people, if they're going to mention about it on like the African American opinion channels, which I subscribe to and I really like, and they usually they're some of the only people on YouTube that actually can talk about issues and have a really good valid point. So people like Harvey of Real World and Nicole Lewis of Nicole's View, Professor Black Truth, Jason Black, Sean James, and the like. I don't agree with everything, of course. I'm a white guy. But I see where they're coming from. I hope to say I see where they're coming from because of me having Asperger's syndrome. I don't equate myself with African Americans, but I can understand sort of the feeling that some have in that regard. Now, anyway, we now all know regarding all the stuff about Bill Cosby, that the allegations and the things that he's been convicted of and what have you are not necessarily true, and they're entirely exaggerated, and really nobody would really give much of a care. Think about it. People are starting to understand in our overtly charged social, political, economic world, which is also affecting our children in many respects. They're starting to understand that we're all we got. I'm not a, you know me, I'm a Democrat. I don't support Donald Trump by any means necessary. And what concerns me and others is that we've, in the last 2 years or so, really with the Me Too stuff and Time's Up stuff, while on a theoretical level it is necessary, I can't quite like how things have gone because it has backfired on us. And the one big triumph the Me Too Time's Up movement had, I said this before in a recent video, which was electing Senator Doug Jones and by defeating Roy Moore. That might backfire on us next year because right now Roy Moore is leading in polls for the Republican Senate primary in Alabama next year. Right now it looks like Senator Doug Jones might get defeated. So how did we go from, okay, we're gonna understand about the women's movement and everything like that, and give a voice to the voiceless, and go after these male people that are just even our own allies and say, you know what, we can't tolerate you anymore with this. How to go from that to basically it being this movement being co-opted by the Q movement, co-opted by the let's get out the pedophiles and all the other child molesters movement that these Republican conservative asses are running. How did it get to that? I mean, you know how it got to that. I know how it got to that. I don't need to necessarily describe to you how it got to that, but I could have seen it coming a mile away. Once it was starting, when personally for me, wasn't really with Harvey Weinstein matter that came to the forefront. It was actually when the Kevin Spacey issue came to the forefront. I'm going to go a little off topic here in this case. But once Spacey was accused, I thought to myself, he may have done this, but you picked the wrong guy to go after. It took a year, but on Christmas Eve last year, he showed up again. And now I've said this to so many people before. I mean, you may have hated Harvey Weinstein, you may have hated all these other people, but in truth, you may hate people like Kevin Spacey, but you're also afraid of them. Hell, he came up to me, I'd probably be afraid of the guy too. This is I've seen a number of his acting roles in movies. There's a line of areas where you can think to yourself, is he really going to be like John Doe in Seven? Is he really going to be like Kaiser Sose or Verbal Kim, The Usual Suspects? Is he really going to be like those characters? You don't. Is he really going to be like Frank Underwood? You don't know. And that's something that he has that's so unique. And the other thing about him is that you really can't catch the guy. You really can't do anything because he's like a ghost in many respects. Now, he appears when he does, and he can take other people down with it. Other people down with him if he feels like whatever. Anyway, since all that time that's been going on, people are starting to understand to themselves, okay, we've went a little too far in these matters. I personally don't think Harvey Weinstein is going to see a day in prison. And he probably shouldn't. In fact, based on comments from, NT over at Crazy Days and Nights, it's a shitty website, they're saying he's probably even going to make money out of this. I could have probably told you about that. I figured, and I do figure, that although it's not going to come out, he's probably got a good chunk of change over the Disney-Fox merger. As I've said, and a lot of this, I really think a lot of the Me Too, Time's Up movement stuff and everything like that, and the aftermath has been tied in with the Disney-Fox merger from 2 years ago, and that got closed this past March. And just recently had a final thing come into fruition in which Comcast, which also wanted to buy Fox, but they bought Sky. They were able to say, okay, we're gonna cede our 30% interest in Hulu to the Walt Disney Company. Within 5 years, Disney basically now owns Hulu. By doing that, everything has kind of been structured and settled, and people have made money off of it. Reason why I think about this thing with Weinstein and the Disney Fox thing is, it's possible that Harvey Weinstein, had he not had this issue come around, he might have been in talks to probably have him and the Weinstein Company purchase Fox, or maybe Disney itself. You gotta remember, the Walt Disney Company really owed the Weinsteins a heck of a lot when they purchased Miramax in 1993. I mean, not in terms of money necessarily, but in terms of prestige. In terms of continued prestige and importance in the independent and auteur cinema market, which is something that we don't really have too much right now. I got to tell you, I've been seeing some recent movies last month or so, and in the last couple months, I've probably seen I've seen maybe about in movies that I've seen in theaters. I've seen about only 4 that are really, really excellent. Avengers Endgame, which is a sequel. Rocket Man, that's a biopic, but a really good one. Booksmarts, which I hope more people get a chance to see. It's really excellent. And John Wick, Chapter 3, Parabellum, which is also another sequel. Some of the rest, I didn't like. And I think a lot of people are looking at these matters and thinking to themselves, oh my goodness, if we take off the likes of Harvey Weinstein and so many others in the film and entertainment and political world, are we going to be left with cookie cutter crap? That's unfortunately the trade-off, and I think people are now starting to realize, oh my goodness, there may be some buyer's remorse. Now, I think he did what he did, but do I really want to see him spend a day in prison? No. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that with Kevin Spacey. I don't want to see that with any of them. And I didn't want to see that with Bill Cosby either. Getting back to the Cosby thing, if you really want to, are with me this far, how I think this occurred and why this has occurred the way it is because what has happened and what has been considered of the issues regarding Dr. Cosby hasn't really been about the sexual allegations. It hasn't been about the drugging or the raping, if it did happen. It's never been about that. The last 22 years, all of this stuff, every road, everything regarding Cosby has been, if not even implied, if not explicit, it's been about his kids. We've not made a discussion about his kids, particularly two of his children that have passed away. Interestingly enough, one of them was born 50 years ago this month. His only son, the only son of Bill and Camille Cosby, Ennis. Interestingly enough, Ennis's death probably did start the initial ball rolling of all the other stuff that's been going on with the Cosby's stance of where he is at today. I'm going to explain why. You have to know that the family structure of the Cosbys has been pretty unique. I believe Bill Cosby and Camille Cosby have, or at least had, an open marriage. What's an open marriage, if you may ask me? Well, it's two people realizing they're the love of their lives, but also realizing, even though they're the love of their lives and they have children and they have a life together, they got other interests. So with Bill, he was a ladies' man. He did things being like that of a pimp. That's what you did at the time. If you had to be successful as a black man, and even particularly in the 60s and 70s, even when you got successful afterwards, yeah, that's what you did. No judgment there for me. I didn't give a shit. Camille, from what I gathered, Camille has also had dalliances with women. I also think some of Cosby's children, at least one or two of the daughters, Enza may have been the other one that died. Enza, who died in 2018, might have been lesbian. I don't really know. But they also had, lesbian or bisexual relationships. So the Cosby family are aware of that matter, and I think they were and still are kind of accepting of the LGBTQ processes. But I think it started to hit home a little bit too close, circa late 1996, early 1997. And I'm going to explain what I think occurred to kind of start all this ball rolling and why I think this is like a psychological break in Dr. Cosby. I think I've never heard if Ennis ever had a relationship with a woman. I'm just going to say it right out there. Even when I read the authorized but not authorized Cosby biography from 2014, just before all this shit happened, I didn't really hear anything about Ennis's relationships. Not to the best of my knowledge. My guess, which was the guess of people in my family, particularly grandparents and others, is that Ennis was gay. I think at a point in which Bill Cosby was attempting to buy NBC after the Cosby Show ended in 1982, and definitely after A Different World ended in 1993, there was a period when simultaneously he had the Cosby Mysteries on and this thing of You Bet Your Life. Around 93, 94, maybe early 95, he was attempting to buy NBC. Universal Pictures in 1995 came up with a good deal to have them be purchased by GE, which basically had Universal become NBC Universal and buy NBC, effectively. Still that way to this day with Comcast's ownership. Of course, in 1996, he started a newer show, which was named Cosby. It was basically the American version of One Foot in the Grave, if you've ever watched that British show. And that was on 4 seasons. It was on CBS. There was some talks that maybe he wanted to buy matters of CBS from Westinghouse and Viacom, or go into interests. When I think around that same time, 96, early 97, if you might remember, the LGBTQ issues were coming even more to the forefront. That was when Ellen DeGeneres first came out by saying that her character on the 3rd season of Ellen was probably gonna come out as a gay person. And then around spring of 97, she had a Time magazine cover story in which she said, "Yeah, it's obvious I am a gay woman." That was a big deal at the time. A lot of you people don't remember it, but it was a really friggin' big deal. I remember we had a lot of discussions on it. I'm pretty sure there were probably some discussions on this thing late 96, very early 97 with the Cosby House. I think Ennis, I don't know if it's proof, if it's even true or not, but this is probably my truth, because it's a good story. I think what happened was that Ennis, probably around late 96, early 97, just before he died, January 16, 1997, mentioned, well, as you know, to his dad, to Bill Cosby, Camille Cosby, one of the families, as you know, I have a relationship with this guy. Now, I don't know if it was a gay relationship, I don't know who it was. I don't know, maybe it could have been a white guy, maybe it could have been a Jewish guy. I don't know. I don't know, and you don't know. But I have this inkling that Ennis was a gay man. And I have this inkling that Bill, maybe Camille, but mainly Bill, was kind of taken a little back by it. Not that he hated Ennis, he didn't. But what I think happened was, I think first couple weeks of January 1997, this thing came around, and then it's also very possible that Ennis probably told, maybe Enza, Humuz, and some of other Cosby's children probably told their dad, look, there's some reports in the National Enquirer, or the Gunner Press, they're going to go after you, because eventually what occurred with the Autumn Jackson and matter and the issuances of basically money ransom and things like that. And maybe the idea was essentially, hey, you just kind of lay low a little bit on being the ladies' man, because you had the reputation for it. Understandable if it's an open marriage. It's not really cheating if it's that way, really. But it's like, yeah, just kind of lay low, And I think he was gonna do it. I also tend to think that Bill might have thought to himself, with Ennis, my boy Ennis, I don't understand why I being with this guy. And he was up in California around the time of January 16 or what have you. Bill, I think, was in the East Coast. He was doing a comedy tour or specials and things like that. My guess was that he probably, what he probably did, what Bill probably did, was kind of have it be like, well, I know some people, I got this nice woman around, kind of come around and say, Ennis, and maybe a white person, and, buy him. It's like, hey, you got this one person, yeah, I think it's a good match for Ennis. You can get buy a drink, what have you, and if it hits up, then we know about what happens with Ennis. And if he doesn't take it, he'll probably, worse this, Ennis will come to us and say, you really thought I was gonna go for this woman, You gotta have to accept the fact that I'm a gay man. That would be the end of it. I think that's what had occurred. But what they didn't know and what they didn't understand was the woman that was following Ennis that night was connected with those Russians and other individuals that were connected to wanting Cosby's head on a platter. I really believe that that what occurred with Ennis Cosby was a sort of a drive. It was effectively a drive-by shooting, and it was a issue in which it was like a statement from those higher up than Bill Cosby and Camille Cosby by saying to them, don't even freaking try to make any more waves with buying NBC or what have you, or buying all these purchases, or else it's not just going to be your son that gets it. It's going to be the rest of your children. And if you go anywhere to talk about us, we can put it right back at you, because you were saying that one woman that was following Ennis Cosby, you basically can say you kind of did that. We could, meaning those that killed Ennis could turn Ennis's death and have Ennis's death be put onto the hands of his father. And that is something nobody wants to talk about. And I understand why. Because if that were to have occurred, people would be thinking, well, did Bill have a role in Ennis's death? He didn't. But it psychologically, if what I think is what I think, that he was like, oh, well, we know a guy knows a guy that knows this woman that just kind of follow Ennis around or what have you. Just follow Ennis around. Didn't mean that he started the seed of eventually, without even intentionally, without even wanting it to happen, without even thinking it was ever going to happen. Did it go to a point in which it eventually was like, in that process, you basically killed your son? I mean, that would be devastating. When Ennis's death was announced, all those years ago, I felt like a part of Bill Cosby and Camille Cosby died with him. They never really were the same. I mean, they got better over time. I personally think Bill's greater emphasis on matters of children's education throughout the late 90s, early 2000s, and I think his burgeoning friendship, it actually was a friendship with Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, was of such importance. You got to remember that the two of them weren't necessarily inseparable, but they knew the same people and they had the same goals. In fact, they both got the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2002 together at the same ceremony. I think when Reverend Fred Rogers died in 2003, I think that also devastated Cosby more so than we think. Anyway, I'll talk about that later. It was one thing, though, for 21 years to have the sword of Damocles be, did you do something with Ennis's death? But it's gotten a lot more devastating since Enza died. Because at the time that Enza had died, I remember this, early January to February 2018, Bill Cosby, Camille Cosby, they had high hopes. They figured, okay, this retrial isn't really going to go anywhere. We got Tom Mesereau defending us. It's gonna. They realized that initially it was an acquittal, but then they had to make it into like a hung jury type of thing, like the year before. They realized it was going to go bad, good for them. There was a potential of going good for them. Bill Cosby was even doing a couple comedy shows that January. And people were coming in, they were liking it. He would start with saying something, yeah, I used to be famous. I don't know the rest of it. But he was in good hopes. That all changed when Enza died. Enza was 44, would have been 45 when she died in 2018. Enza was being treated for certain matters of cancer, but she was also the one. All four of the Cosby daughters were in full defense of the Cosby family. Enza was the one that was also granting a lot of interviews and everything like that. And I think he wanted to have. I think there was a sense of, okay, well, Enza may have this cancer thing and this treatment come around, and she'll be fine. We'll have her be testifying and do some public relations. My guess is that some people had felt, again, at the point in which there was, from a period of like 2013 to about 2015 or some sort, another attempt to buy NBC, or buy chunks of Comcast and Hulu as well, which the Cosbys had interests in. I'll talk about that another time. But I think they were wanting to have. There was a sense that Enzo was probably going to get a little better enough to get out of the hospital for a while and help out, get some publicity, what have you. I think word got around to those that wanted Cosby's head on a platter